Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Monday, the 3rd day of June, 2024. Now, since we left you this morning, more people have come out demanding that Netanyahu clearly announce that he will not surrender to Hamas. Netanyahu finally did respond and said that the Biden administration of the deal did not accurately represent Israel's proposal. In other words, Biden lied about it. The U.S. then pushed back and said, no, it does represent an Israeli proposal. In other words, Netanyahu is lying about it. We then learn a little more about what is contained in the proposal to Hamas, and then we're kind of going to leave it at that. All right, let's look at the headlines. Number one, right-wing organizations to Netanyahu announce that you will not agree to surrender to Hamas. Now, this was written yesterday. Right-wing organizations urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to reject Biden's ceasefire plan. Withdrawal from the Strip means canceling all the military achievements we achieved in the war. Now, we saw earlier from Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, two members of the party, Likud party, say we will leave the government if you do not come out and clearly state that you're not going to give in to Hamas. David Friedman, the former ambassador to Israel from the U.S. and the Trump administration, said something very similar. Now we have these organizations saying this, and it's powerful what they say here. And here's, again, what they told Netanyahu. They demanded that he not accept the outline for a hostage release deal as proposed by Biden, although Biden and U.S. still say this was the Israeli proposal, which Israel says it's not. But here's what they say. Listen to this. This is really powerful. The fate of the state of Israel is in your hands. For years, you called yourself the guardian of Israel, and now your legacy is being tested. The heads of the organizations wrote to Netanyahu, adding that Biden's speech regarding the cessation of hostilities and the rehabilitation of Gaza means one thing, and that is the destruction of the state of Israel. Our enemies are watching carefully. If the war does not end with the elimination of Hamas, it will conclude with the end of the Zionist vision. We call on you to announce clearly and sharply that you will not agree to surrender to Hamas, the right-wing organizations demanded. Hundreds of thousands of fighters mobilized on October 7th, and many of them are now in the second and even third round of fighting in the South and in the North. How can you look into the eyes of the bereaved families and into the eyes of the men and women fighters if you surrender to Hamas? Recently concluded surveys among fighters in the reserves unequivocally state the obvious. The IDF, that's the Israeli Defense Force, the People's Army, and the entire nation demands the defeat of the enemy and the crushing of Hamas, not steps of weakness and withdrawal, the letter said. In conclusion, these organizations wrote to Netanyahu, withdrawal from the Strip means canceling all the military achievements we achieved in the war. The end of the war means another October 7th, more hostages, more deaths of innocent Israelis. Prime Minister, stop the avalanche. It's time to show patience and courage like the great leaders of the Jewish people before you did. Don't surrender to Hamas. And that's it. That is very, very powerful. A number of groups penned that to Netanyahu. All right, we've got also Ben-Gvir, something else that he came out and said. This is from Reuters, so it's a little tainted because it says a far right, again, always they're far right, a far right Israeli coalition partner accused Prime Minister Netanyahu on Monday, that's today, of trying to whitewash a deal to wind down the Gaza war that is being advanced by President Joe Biden. Again, advanced by Biden, not Israel, and repeated a threat to quit the government. National Security member Itamar Ben-Gvir told his parliamentary faction that Netanyahu invited him to read the proposal, but the premier's aides twice failed to produce the document. In fact, one person said there isn't even a written proposal. And so, as Ben-Gvir said, look, any plan must entail toppling Hamas, period. All right. Now Netanyahu finally comes out and responds more fully. He responded very briefly, as we talked about earlier, but now he's going to respond more fully. And he did this later today in Israel. All right. He says, I will not be ready to stop the war. Despite what President Biden said, it has not yet been agreed how many hostages will be released in the first phase. We can stop the fighting for 42 days in order to return the hostages. We cannot stop the war. The Iranians and all of our enemies are looking at us and want to see if we surrender, emphasized the prime minister. He noted that there are many more details in the deal, and the war will not end without achieving all of our objectives. Don't pay attention to the publications. There's a lot of fake news going around. We will never give up on total victory. And he goes on to say, we work in countless ways to bring back our hostages. I think about them all the time. I think about them all the time. He says it twice. About their families, about their suffering. That's why we went a long way to bring them back. While doing this, we maintain the goals of the war. Chief among them is the elimination of Hamas, Netanyahu clarified. We insist, he added, that we will complete both the freeing of the hostages and the winning of the war. It is part of the outline. It is not something I am adding now. It is not something I'm adding because I was pressured in the coalition. It is something we unanimously agreed upon in the war coalition. All right, that's what he said. So let's consider this for a second. So we get the idea now a little bit what Israel did propose. Stop the fighting for 42 days in order to get the hostages back. That's their proposal. 6 weeks, 6-week ceasefire to get some of the hostages back. All right, here's a couple of things we initially say. First, Hamas will not likely agree to a 40-day cessation of fighting, give back a number of hostages, only to let Israel continue afterwards and destroy the military and completely take over Gaza. Now, according to Biden, after the first phase of the agreement, then Israel would discuss ending their campaign in Gaza. This is something that Hamas would agree upon, except they said they would not release any hostages till all the fighting ceases and Israel had left Gaza. And of course, this is not what Israel is saying. Second, why would Israel want to have a 6-week lull? 42 days. Hamas still has 2/3 of its tunnels and 2/3 of its fighters left. This would give them plenty of time to regroup, resupply, and just set traps for Israel once they started again after this 6-week lull. And third, what in the world would the soldiers do for 42 days? Would they go back home and leave their positions? Or would they stay in their positions in Gaza as sitting ducks without fighting or advancing? This doesn't sound very promising, does it? All right. Now we go to headline 4. Here comes the White House. They push back and say, this, Biden accurately reflects Israel's proposal. We're confident that Biden's speech accurately reflects that Israeli proposal, a proposal that we work with the Israelis on, so I know of no gaps to speak of. This is John Kirby from the White House, his National Security Council spokesperson. After Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly said that there were gaps between the latest Israeli hostage deal proposal and the offer publicly laid out by U.S. President Joe Biden, the White House says, we're not aware of such gaps. Kirby says, as for the gaps, I don't know what gaps you're referring to, he said during a briefing with reporters. He notes that Netanyahu's foreign policy advisor confirmed to the Times of London over the weekend that the offer detailed by Biden was indeed an Israeli proposal. We're confident Biden's speech accurately reflects that Israeli proposal, a proposal that we work with the Israelis on. And so I know of no gaps to speak of, Kirby says. So in other words, the idea that during the second phase, Israel would commit to a permanent ceasefire is Israel's proposal, because that's the second phase. Remember, commit to a permanent ceasefire. It's not Biden's, it's Israel's. And to put it bluntly, it's Netanyahu who is the liar, not Biden, according to the U.S. All right, whom do we believe? Well, I think that's rather obvious, but I'll let you make your decision on that. All right, now headline number 5. This one's really interesting. This is from Breitbart. The State Department admits Biden's ceasefire plan is virtually identical to Hamas's proposals. Isn't it interesting? State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters today, Monday, that the proposal President Joe Biden presented Friday was virtually identical to proposals that Hamas terrorists had presented in recent weeks. Miller said that because the 3-point plan was virtually identical and almost identical to Hamas's own proposals, that Hamas should accept the deal. As Breitbart News reported last Friday, Biden proposed a 3-part deal, claiming that it was an Israeli roadmap. Curiously, however, the deal barely mentioned Hamas and did not require the terror group to disarm. It also said that Israel would withdraw from Gaza before all the hostages were freed. Biden also said there were parties in the Israeli government, which had supposedly proposed the deal, that would reject the deal. That's what didn't make sense. They proposed the deal, but these same parties would reject the deal. He warned them that total victory against Hamas was impossible. Hamas leaders welcomed the deal, but have yet to formally accept it. Now, like the article says, the deal resembles Hamas's proposals, though Hamas has rejected all plans that have not come, and here's the heavy important bit, that have not come with an explicit written commitment guaranteed by the United States that Israel would end the war without destroying Hamas. That's what they want, an explicit written commitment that the U.S. would guarantee that Hamas wouldn't be destroyed. In the hours after Biden's speech, it became clear the proposal had not, in fact, come from the Israeli government. Right-wing parties, as we mentioned, threatened to quit the government and force new elections if it was accepted. Left-wing protesters demanded it to be accepted. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, while being careful not to accuse Biden explicitly of lying, said the deal that Biden had presented was partial, and that Israel would not accept a deal that prevented it from destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities. It appeared by Monday that Biden had misled the world in an attempt to box Israel into a deal that attempted to appease Hamas. He may have also hoped to cause instability in Netanyahu's coalition. That's exactly what he's trying to do. He wanted to box Israel in. Remember what he did. He gave this speech, this talk, right when the beginning of the Sabbath took place in Israel. In other words, knowing that Israel could not respond for at least 24 hours because everything shuts down during the Sabbath. And he gave it knowing that the world would believe that this was an Israeli roadmap. All right. So Miller continued to insist this proposal comes from the Israeli government. Asked by a reporter what would happen if Hamas rejected the deal, Miller seemed stumped. While saying that he did not want to deal in hypotheticals, Miller said that Hamas would have to explain such a decision to the world if they basically said no. Well, what they would do, obviously, they'd ask for more. They always do. When you give a deal to someone like Hamas, they never accept it as is. They will add something always to their favor. All right, so let's sum up. While Netanyahu continues to claim that Israel will not stop until all of their objectives are met, having a 6-week lull in the fighting when you have the momentum does not seem like a pathway to victory, does it? It is more than obvious by now that the U.S., for whatever reason or reasons, does not want Israel to destroy Hamas as the controller of Gaza. In other words, they seem to be promoting a deal that would keep Hamas in power, which of course means that Hamas achieved victory with their murderous rampage of October 7th and would have every reason to do something like that again. Now, here's the key. As we know from Scripture, Israel will indeed survive. They will not be destroyed, but they will not be at peace either with their neighbors. In addition, they will be all the more isolated from the world. And this comes from our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end when we detail this. If you're new with us, it is a book on our website, Educating Our World. 25 Signs. We're near the end. It's one of 65 books we've written. This was under the section of Bible prophecy, where there's a dozen books under that heading. Everything is free. It's a free download, as all our material is, so please take advantage of it. And three of the headlines, three of the signs of the 25 signs, the miracle of Israel's survival. They have indeed survived. That is the miracle. But that's sign number 1. But sign number 7, there'll be a continual search for peace in Israel. They'll survive, but never be at peace. And finally, sign number 21, there'll be a rise in anti-Semitism. The entire world will be against Israel, and that's where we're headed right now. So we'll see what takes place tomorrow. This continuing soap opera is ongoing. It's almost like a he said, she said. You said this. No, we didn't. Who's telling the truth? Well, it's certainly not Joe Biden, the United States of America. That we can guarantee. And so we will see what Israel does. What is Netanyahu going to do? He has to do, there's more splaining he needs to do, in other words. So let's see what he has to say tomorrow in the Israeli government and see what the other Israelis say with respect to whatever Netanyahu comes up with. Until then, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. And as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.